extraordinary footage we've watched throughout this afternoon, the handover from Hamas, the chaotic scenes in Gaza, and now about to be, or perhaps you can confirm, have they been reunited with their families?
Well, I can certainly confirm from the government's point of view that they are back in Israel, out of Hamas's hands, and we have them in our healthcare system, and they'll be getting the best possible healthcare they can after 471 days in captivity.
Are you able to tell us from initial assessments how they are? We certainly saw a close-up photograph as they got into the Hamas vehicle. They looked anxious, they looked scared, I have to say.
Well, look, all of us here in Israel are between a mixture of tears and trepidation and elation because, you know, these are our daughters, these are our young women, these are innocent people that have been taken, some of them in their pajamas, from where they lived on that kibbutz down south, and now finally they've been released. This is a day that all of us here were praying for, hoping for. It's been a heavy, heavy price, both in our soldiers, but also in releasing these convicted terrorists. But all of us here, we don't know their state yet, but we are so happy they are home. We're absolutely elated. You can probably feel that in the square right now.
We were watching. It's a very noisy environment. We're very grateful you joined us here. We heard the cheers, we heard the applause as the various stages of handover were completed. How difficult has it been to get to this point? It's been a grinding negotiation, led perhaps by the Qataris, the input of the Americans, we know, the Egyptians. But how hard has it been for the Israeli government to watch this process unfold?
Look, I can't begin to tell you how emotional this whole experience has been for all of us here in Israel. We're mixed between tears and elation, and we don't know what sort of state they're going to be in, because we've heard from the mouths of girls that have been released from Hamas captivity, the terrible things which they've gone through, the dungeons, the rapes, the inhumane treatment which they've received. So all of us here are delighted that they're home. Look, from the Israeli government's point of view, we have a humanitarian duty to save our people. Every Israeli life is, of course, supremely important to the government of Israel. Of course, every life is important, but this government had a responsibility, a humanitarian duty to bring these people home. And the fact that we've got these three girls home, it is the most wonderful feeling. All of us are close to tears constantly. So it's a really wonderful time, and no doubt they'll be coming close to their families right now. All of us are absolutely over the moon.
You sound like you are. I've spoken to so many people who are nearly in tears already today, I have to say. There is a sense of emotion, partly because everybody has waited so long for this. Some suggesting this is a deal that was very close to May. You could have saved the lives of people like Carmel Gat. I spoke to her relatives today, the 6 hostages who were shot dead by Hamas in tunnels as Israeli Defense Forces approached. You could have saved the lives of Israeli soldiers who've died in Gaza. Why was it not possible to agree this deal earlier and save those people?
Well, I can answer that in one word, and that word is Hamas, the terrorist organization. I was briefed by the Israeli negotiating team, and they told me very, very clearly that it was Hamas who've been dragging their feet, Hamas who did not want to close a deal, and Sinwar in particular did not want a deal. With Sinwar's elimination, with the taking out of most of the leadership of Hamas, but also with Iran having been pushed back, with the Hezbollah having been massively degraded, with Hamas's patron in Syria, Bashar al-Assad, having been deposed by his own people, and Iran, their air defenses exposed, their nuclear program disrupted, their ballistic missile production having been also massively disrupted. Hamas had nowhere to go. The cavalry were not coming. The Americans have made this absolutely clear. It has been Hamas that have been dragging their feet all this time. We wanted this deal, and we are only too grateful now it has happened. It is, you know, it's not a deal which we're delighted about, because we're releasing terrorists with blood on their hands.
Well, a young teenager is one of them, to be fair. I doubt if that person is and most of them are women. So perhaps not in this first phase.
Indeed. There's been a corresponding
and some
price.
Some of them have been picked up sitting in their cars waiting at a checkpoint. You know, so has there been as the Palestinian Prisoners Society told me yesterday in Bethlehem when I went there, has there been a policy of revenge against the Palestinian people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem because of October the 7th?
So frankly, that's an offensive assertion. This is a democratic government that lives by the rule of law. We have an independent judiciary. You might have heard that this is a big issue here in Israel. So frankly, that is an offensive comment. We have a police force, a legal system where we take law and order extremely seriously. So look, when Israel apprehends people on suspicion of terrorism or after having committed real crimes, then they go through due process. Okay, this is the only democracy in hundreds of miles in any direction. Okay, so that sort of assertion to us is absolutely not.
So are you suggesting that those people who've been taken from Gaza and held, no one seems to know, have they gone through due process as well?
Well, look, we've taken a lot of people, a lot of Hamas people, suspected Hamas people, as prisoner. But that's been very, very important because they've shared with us a lot of information. We wanted to get information out of them to see when is the next terrorist attack, where our hostages are, give us the strength of Hamas. And so that's been very, very important. And also, let's not forget, Israel did not expect this war. Okay, we weren't ready to take on tens of thousands of Hamas prisoners. So each of them will go through due process. It's our duty as a democratic country and a duty we take very, very seriously.
So we're watching pictures of a jail right now where there will be that release as part of this prisoner exchange. You are confirming that those who have been taken from Gaza, we've seen some of them stripped naked, sat in the streets, have we not? You're confirming they will go through due process.
So if they've been stripped naked, it's because we worry that they have a suicide belt on them. Okay, we've got no interest, Gazans are not going anywhere, Israelis are not going anywhere. Ultimately, we will have to live together. But it's our duty to make sure, it's our duty to the Israeli people to make sure that terrorists are apprehended and arrested and there's due process.
Yes, we're just watching pictures now of the Israel-Gaza border. It is at the Reem crossing, I understand, that we're expecting to see perhaps some of the pictures as the women are handed over. And how important is it that they managed to meet their mothers who've flown down to see them so quickly?
Look, Israel has been waiting for this moment for many, many months now, 15 months now. I've been in touch with some of the hospitals, Beilinson and Sheba Hospital. Both of them have been doing everything they can to get the system ready to receive them and to give them every possible care. That's psychological care, medical care, and of course to facilitate their families as well.
Let's show you then the pictures of those mothers waiting at that reception point that the IDF has set up. There they are, crowding around. Let's just watch that moment. Yes, I think it's looping, in fact, but what an amazing moment for them, because what you have to understand about all the families is they do not know if their loved one is alive, and this is the first proof of life in 15 months that they finally can see that their daughters are safe and sound, as Daniel Hagari put it.
So incredibly emotional scenes for Israelis, excuse me. They are incredibly emotional scenes because all of us here in Israel, this is an open wound in our society. Okay. Look, Israel's government, to its credit, have done everything in our power to bring these people home. Let's not lose sight for a moment that they were taken by jihadists, a jihadist terrorist organization that, to be honest, hate their own people, maybe even more than they hate Israelis. They've tried to maximize the number of deaths amongst their own people. They say it very, very clearly. But also, their ambition was to wipe this country off the face of the earth. 15 months on, at a very heavy price. We are stronger, we are more united, we are more settled, and we look forward to a brighter, more peaceful future in this neighborhood.
Tears shed, no doubt, seeing those pictures across Israel. Three mothers who've been through hell, that they both describe, or they all describe, the torturous process that they've lived through for 471 days of waiting. And for those who have been freed, they're living with the trauma of that day, of being taken, of seeing people dying around them. They're living with the trauma of being dragged into Gaza, living, we know, in tunnels. I spoke to one who suggested that their grandmother walked 40 meters to the surface to be free. How will the state of Israel now care for those people? What help will be offered to them to adjust to the life they can now see, the future they can now see in front of them?
Look, this was the worst day of Jew killing since the Second World War, and we know that these people have been through the most unbearable trauma, but this country has both physically and metaphorically thrown their arms around not only the families but also the hostages as well. They've been through hell, but we are so happy that they are home now and they can begin the rehabilitation process. Don't forget, now with these three young ladies home, there remain 94 hostages still in Hamas captivity. You know, this war could end right now before we put our kids to bed if Hamas surrendered and let our hostages go. The war would be over in an instant.
Well, I see the face just behind you of Doron. Joel, you talked about a 30-year-old taken in 2014. His body was recovered today. It brought the number from 98, I know, to 97. One more family who has closure today, which I know you're very proud of that moment. But in Gaza, 90%, 92% of homes have been destroyed. Half the hospitals are dysfunctional. People have been starving. There's been a sense that they've been cut off without the food, water, fuel, power supplies that they need. What help will Israel offer the people of Gaza to normalize relations between these neighbors? Because if you don't help, how will there ever be peace between your peoples?
Just a quick reminder that Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. It was actually an experiment to see what would happen if this idea about creating a Palestinian homeland could be free of Israelis and they could have a go at creating their own homeland. Now that experiment has been a shocking failure because here we are in 2025. Hamas turned it into a one big terrorist base. All the money that went into Gaza, instead of building up hospitals, universities, schools and roads, unfortunately went down into the ground to build this massive terror tunnel network. From Israel's point of view, we have got in as much aid as we possibly could. 1,300,000 tons of aid. That's more than enough food for everyone in Gaza. Hamas have stolen much of the aid and requisitioned it, and after feeding themselves, sold it back to Gaza's population at vastly increased prices. The best future for Gaza is
Just what's happening here, just the booze that we're seeing. It's a statement, is it, from someone?
Yeah, it's a statement from a government minister who's not particularly popular.
Right.
But look, this is an open society. You're seeing it here, warts and all. Okay, people can express their view.
I have one final question.
Sure.
The stated aims of the Netanyahu government were to destroy Hamas after the horrors of October the 7th. And they were to get these faces home, the people we see all around Hostages Square. In destroying Hamas, though, hostages died. You know Israeli hostages died. And you could not bring them home because you were still destroying Hamas. Were those two mutually excluding things? Did that drag on the pain for the families who were waiting for their loved ones to return?
Look, it was Hamas that took them hostage, Hamas that kept them hostage, and Hamas that kept fighting towards us. Okay, they could have been home, our hostages, on October the 8th. Okay, they could have not been taken. It was Hamas that have been dragging their feet. This notion, which has been carried in much of the international media, that if only Israel had made a deal. I mean, maybe you know something I don't, because the people in the room in the negotiations, like the Americans, they all say the same thing. Hamas were not interested in a deal until they were greatly degraded, until their leadership was eviscerated, until their missile and rocket arsenal had been taken away, until, more importantly, Iran had been massively put back in its box. Now they've got nowhere to go. The cavalry's not coming. That's why they've come to a deal. Look, our objectives in this war remain the same. They are to bring back our hostages, the 94 of them which are still there, and also to make sure that Hamas is not in control in Gaza, because a Gaza with Hamas in control is a Gaza which is an enemy of the Gazan people. Hamas is an enemy of the Gazan people. The sooner they're gone, the better.
One word then to describe today.
Elation, and because we're in Israel, I'll ask for a little bit more, and trepidation at the same time.